In this tutorial, I will give you some guidance on identifying problem areas that may be causing you net losses that you see on your income statement. Where do I start to look for why I am losing money, regardless of my best efforts? What questions do I need to ask that will help me target my problem areas? The best way to determine why you are having net losses on the bottom of your income statement is to start at the top of that report. So, first we'll open up that report. When looking at the net sales revenues, the question to ask is, are your sales revenues sufficient to cover the expenses you incurred to generate these revenues? To help answer this question, look at your sales forecast versus your actual sales. To do that, we need to go to the Marketing Decisions panel. Were you relatively accurate with your forecast of how many units you would sell this quarter, or, as in this case, actually sold more than what was forecasted? If you were, then the cause of your net loss is most likely not because of your net sales revenues. Of course, this assumes that your sales forecast for the quarter was for a positive net income. If you forecasted that you would lose money, then you should not be surprised that you have a net loss after the quarter was processed. While there may be occasions that you expect to lose money, such as when you are expanding plant capacity and hiring a number of workers to staff this expansion, this would be a temporary situation, not a continuing one. If you are experiencing repeated losses when you are having good sales, then you have a fundamental problem that needs to be corrected. If your actual sales were considerably short of what you forecasted, this needs to be corrected before you are likely to be profitable. If the number of units that you sold is, let's say, 4,000 units less than what you forecasted, this will have a direct impact on your net sales revenues. So if you forecasted to have 900,000 in sales revenues, but only had 700,000 in sales revenues, the loss of that 200,000 in revenues would likely result in a loss for the quarter. Do you know why this occurred? Have you done the marketing research on your competitors to know if you have a competitive position that will yield the sales that you desire? For example, do you have a competitive advantage in terms of price or quality that will get you the sales you need to be profitable? Or does your competition have a much better price-quality position than you, making it unlikely that you will achieve the sales you forecasted? If you can't answer these questions, you need to conduct some marketing research so that you can position your products in the market to yield the sales you need. You also need to consider whether you're spending too little in your marketing efforts to attract customers and convince them to buy your products. You may have an attractive product, but few people know about it due to your promotional efforts. Since manufacturing cost of goods sold, showing on your income statement, comes from the cost of goods sold report, let's open that report now and see if we can determine what's causing our high costs. So I've opened up that report and I positioned it so we can look at both the income statement and the cost of goods sold report at the same time. Your cost of goods sold report shows the various costs that you incurred to make your products this quarter. These costs include the cost of materials, labor, quality, and plant facilities. These costs are tallied and divided by the number of units produced to determine the cost per unit to manufacture the products. Unless you sold out of all of your products last quarter, the cost of goods sold report will also show the cost of products you have in inventory. A weighted average is calculated for the cost of this quarter's manufacturing and last quarter's inventory. This average cost per unit is then used to determine the cost of the product sold this quarter. This is worth noting because if the cost of the products in inventory is dramatically higher than this quarter's manufacturing cost, it will have a negative impact on the cost of the products that you sell. So look to see if this quarter's cost problem is due to high cost from the carryover of last quarter's cost. If your high manufacturing costs are a hangover from last quarter, then you will have to live with them for the short run and focus on not repeating this in the future. But if your high costs are from this quarter's operations, you can still make changes to your manufacturing decisions to lower your cost before your decisions are processed. So where should we start to assess your current manufacturing costs? Let's start by looking at your selling price compared to your per unit production cost. Is the gap between the price for which you sell your product versus the cost of making it sufficient to cover the cost of selling the product? If your cost to make the product is higher than your selling price, you have a big problem. There's an old saying that if you lose $1 on each item you sell, then you can't make it up in volume. It's simple math. To have it cost you $60 to make it and selling it for $59 is not going to be profitable, no matter how many units you sell. If this is your situation, then you have either priced your product unrealistically low, or you have some large inefficiencies in your manufacturing operations that need to be corrected. For example, you may have done a good job in controlling your manufacturing cost and kept them as low as possible. However, if you are making a Mercedes-type product but pricing it comparable to a Ford, you will likely lose money even if you are efficient at making it. Of course, your problem could be a combination of pricing too low and having inefficient operations. Most likely your situation will not be that dire. But if the difference between your price versus cost per unit is only a few dollars, you will have a hard time being profitable. Why? Because you need to generate enough excess funds after paying your manufacturing cost to be able to cover the other costs of running your business, such as marketing and warehouse expenses. So if your cost of making your products is too high, what is the cause? Knowing this will allow you to take corrective action. If your manufacturing costs are high, it is most likely the result of inefficiency in the process. That inefficiency can be in three areas: materials, labor, or plant utilization. For example, do you have an idle plant or workers? Or perhaps you are incurring costs due to excessive utilization of those resources. Do you have unneeded costs due to retaining excessive material inventory levels? Look at each of these areas separately to determine if there are costs that you can avoid. The money spent on quality is also part of your manufacturing cost, but that expenditure should be counterbalanced by being able to charge a higher price for your products and/or achieving higher sales volume, because the level of quality you are offering for the price charged makes the product more attractive to customers. So you should look at the money spent on quality differently than the money spent on manufacturing costs. So ask yourself if you are appropriately leveraging the quality of your products. You can get insights into determining that by looking at your marketing efforts. This leads me to talking about the next area to look at, which are the costs associated with getting potential customers to buy your products. For your business, if your marketing costs are more than 20% of your sales revenues, then being profitable is likely to be a challenge. The marketing costs shown on your income statement come from the S&A report, so let's examine that report. As I did with the cost of goods sold report, I have positioned the S&A report alongside the income statement, so we can look at them both simultaneously. If your S&A costs are too high, ask yourself whether you are spending money to promote your products beyond the point of diminishing returns. For example, are you spending so much on advertising that the last $100 that you spent is resulting in only $50 worth of sales? Are you directing your advertising expenditures to a medium that is missing your intended customers? Or, as I mentioned earlier, are you spending money on quality but not getting that message out to your customers so that you can price accordingly? You should also look at money you spent on market research. Are you getting payback for the money you spent? Are you using that information you purchased to make better decisions in the future that then will translate into higher profit? Are you buying information and then not analyzing it? These are all questions that you need to answer as you look at your S&A report. The next area of expenses on your income statement that we want to look at is warehouse operations. So I have opened the warehouse operations report so that we can look for inefficiencies there. If you have large stockouts, it is a signal that your marketing and manufacturing operations are not in sync. Either you are not ensuring that you have enough products available to meet the demand generated by your marketing plan, or your marketing efforts are outstripping your ability to meet your demand. In either case, you have spent money on marketing your product and not gotten sales revenues in return for that expenditure. You should also look at the cost for maintaining an inventory of your product. Having too large an inventory incurs very real storage costs for these items, but there is also the opportunity cost for not having enough inventory on hand to meet demand and consequently suffering stockouts. You need to balance these two costs with any bulk purchasing discounts that may be available. So look at these individual elements of the warehouse operations to determine if you have any inefficiencies there that you can minimize, if not eliminate. The last expense area to look at in your income statement is your interest expense. Are you borrowing so much money that associated interest charges are stripping away your profits? Are you incurring emergency loans at high interest rates that needlessly increase your interest expense? Borrowing money is part of any business, but you need to be judicious in how you manage this. I hope this tutorial has given you some help in identifying where excess costs may be causing you losses in your business. Learning to be as efficient as possible is critical to business success. So work to make your company as profitable as possible. Good luck!